The behavioural iceberg. Everyone talks about changing behaviours, but what is a behaviour? A great analogy for the word behaviour is an iceberg floating in the ocean. What's underneath the surface of the iceberg? What drives our behaviour on a day-to-day basis? Well, for me, a behaviour is everything you say and everything you do. When you ask a group of people what drives their behaviour on a day-to-day basis, the last thing they consider is their feelings and emotions. We don't consider our feelings and emotions because most of us are conditioned to suppress them. Why is it we don't consider our feelings and emotions when thinking about how we change behaviour? We never consider how we make people feel when we put them to work. Consider this simple example. Your kids on the way to school on a Monday morning. They drag themselves to school, not looking forward to triple maths first. But then compare that to their behaviours on a Friday afternoon on the way home. They skip, run and jump all the way home because they've got football or netball practice in the evening. Let's consider that example in the workplace. You give somebody a list of jobs to do. They're highly likely to sift through the list and pick the ones they want to do first and crack on, and leave the ones they want to do least right till the last. Some people just get the worst job first, rush it through, get it out of the way. But we never really consider how that affects our human interaction. Have you ever noticed how you creatively avoid that person you don't feel good about talking to? You'll find a phone call to make, or an email you've just got to finish, or another place you need to be, rather than have that difficult conversation. And it's purely driven by how we feel and emote. How do people behave when they feel good about a job they've been asked to do? They approach it with an enthusiastic, committed and positive point of view and try and do a really good job. Yet when they don't feel good about a job they've been asked to do, they'll find all sorts of ways of avoiding it, half-hearted, slapdash approach. If we don't consider the feelings and emotions of our teams when we put them to work, we surely are as responsible as they are for the quality of work they end up delivering. So what's a little deeper down the iceberg than feelings and emotions? A word that's commonly used but rarely understood is attitude. But what is an attitude? People use words like, it's my personality, it's the way I am, or my character. The interesting thing about when we describe attitude is we always miss the most important point. That is that our attitude is our chosen response to any given situation, and we're always free to choose. Our challenge is we forget we made a choice. It's like our attitude becomes a groove, a habit, just a way of thinking. Somebody comes along and offers us a new way of thinking, and it's like we reject it out of hand. It doesn't fit with our current mental picture of how things should be. Psychologists call this subjective validation. It's like we automatically delete any information which doesn't fit our existing way of thinking. Yet changing our attitude and taking another path is as easy as taking the first step out of our rutted thinking. And the old way of thinking eventually gets replaced by a new and improved you. So let's look at some different things people hold attitudes towards. Some people hold an attitude towards the past. In fact, they don't just hold the attitude towards the past, they live in it. Now for me, the past is for reference, not for residence. But we allow the past to influence then our attitude towards the future. Some people look towards the future with fear and dread, others with optimism and hope. Yet it's purely a matter of choice. The scary thing about the attitude we hold towards the future is we'll often, because of subjective validation, only accept the future which fits with our current way of thinking, with what we deserve. And that leads us to the next and most important attitude. The attitude most people give away when they meet you in the morning. What attitude towards themselves do they have? What level of self-esteem do they have? Are they designing a life or making a living? Self-esteem is the bedrock of human performance, and we never consider the self-esteem of our teams and individuals when we're putting them to work. We never consider, have I made that person feel better about themselves before they go out and do that job? Or have I just destroyed their self-esteem and consequently their feelings and emotions and their current behaviour for the day? So let's consider attitudes towards other people, or stereotypes. We develop stereotypes over many years of exposure to different kinds of people in different kinds of workplaces, and we allow those stereotypes to become grooves that we get in. Somebody comes along and challenges one of those grooves. It doesn't fit. We reject it out of hand. We still allow those stereotypes, those grooves, to influence the way we behave towards them and our expectations of them. And we hold attitudes to all sorts of different people and things. We see a teenager with a hoodie, we automatically think something. We see a safety guy walking down the street, we automatically know what's going to happen. And before they've even interacted, we've decided how the conversation will be. Our challenge is, we don't always get it right. But once we've made our mind up about a supervisor, manager, or leader, we can then very quickly allow that attitude to infect the bigger picture, our attitude towards the job, the company, or even the work type. That then creates an environment where we don't even feel good about going to work on a day-by-day basis. What's it like having somebody in your team who's got a really negative attitude? How does it affect the way the team behaves? It drags people down. It slows the job down. It makes the day drag. But what's it like having somebody in your team who's got a really positive attitude? Well, it lifts the team. It enthuses the team. It encourages people to get along and have a good time. We never consider how infectious our attitudes are. So if attitudes are infectious, is yours worth catching? So what is a little deeper down the iceberg than our attitude? Beliefs are the rules that we hold to be true. The challenge is, whether they're right or wrong, it's irrelevant. We act in accordance with what we believe to be true. Beliefs are our rule book that guide our behaviours, and we never share our beliefs in the workplace. We never talk about what people think is right and wrong. We just notice their behaviours and deal with those accordingly. But beliefs don't just drive our attitudes. There's something a little deeper. Values are what motivates us. They're what gets us out of bed in the morning. They're what makes us want to go and make the world a better place. We rarely share our values, even though they're what motivate us on a day-to-day basis. Managers, leaders, even supervisors, what makes them tick? Why do they do what they do? Consider leaders that really understand what makes you tick. It's like they reach inside you and shake what's important. It gets you moving. It motivates you emotionally. It's like they speak to you on a totally different level. You might say they're visionary, but it's purely because they're great at communicating what's important to them and the values of the business. That's what creates high-performing individuals, teams, and organizations. So what forms the iceberg in the first place? Psychologists call the process that creates our personal icebergs conditioning. The question, I guess, is this: who's been conditioning you? Name names. First people most think of when they think about who conditions them is their parents. Teachers. How many people will say they had a teacher that put them right off a subject? Peers and close friends. They seem to have the ability to influence us at quite a deep level, and often have us doing things we probably wouldn't do if they weren't there. Last on our list of people we'd like to blame for our conditioning is the government, the media, and sometimes even the business. The one person we miss out of all the people responsible for our conditioning is ourself. We rarely recognize the power of self-conditioning. At what age do most people recognize they have a mind of their own? Well, we have a term for it in the UK. We call it the terrible twos. We suddenly realize our child has a mind all of their own. It's very easy to blame others for the person we've become and miss the fact that we probably did more self-conditioning than they could ever be responsible for. How many of you talk to yourselves and tell yourselves you haven't got what it takes to do that job, to be a great dad or mom, to achieve that goal? If you're constantly telling yourself you haven't got what it takes, negative self-talk leads you to behave in a way which predicts your own destiny. You'll tell yourself you haven't got what it takes, and you'll try and fail. And say to yourself, see, I knew I hadn't got what it takes. I knew I couldn't do that. And negative self-talk becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like we keep a lid on our own jar. We tell ourselves, that's my potential, and that's all I'll ever achieve. But there's an interesting fact about human beings. Every single person on the planet can be more and achieve more than they think they can. But they have to start by focusing on what they can do and how they think. Start by noticing what you're good at and reinforcing that you can and will achieve that fantastic goal. That'll lead you in the right direction to achieving the things you really think you're worthy of, not what you currently have. So now we all realise that behaviour is just the tip of an iceberg. And to really truly get the best out of ourselves and others, defrosting the iceberg and talking to people on a different level will help us improve the performance of ourselves and our teams. And in the next digital clip, you'll be taken through a model called the mind mechanics, which helps you understand how the mechanisms of the mind create behaviours.